Do we know the emissions coming out of these wildfires? Do we have a sense of that? Because I don't know, you just imagine the amount of mitigation efforts that we're trying to do these days probably completely gets overwhelmed by these wildfires and the emissions coming out of them. Any sense or comments on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in mitigating future climate change, there's a keen focus on reducing emissions. And we
Yeah.
do, I wouldn't say we measure it precisely, but we can approximate. And the emissions due to wildfires in recent years is actually on par or exceeding human sources of emissions. And so,
Over
um,
what? Over how much time? Like, what do you mean by that?
over a fire season,
Oh, okay.
we
Okay.
we could be on par or exceed all other sources of human emissions from that jurisdiction due to the wildfires. And so wildfires are it's kind of this feedback loop we're in.
Yes.
Wildfires are contributing emissions just as human sources of emissions are, but that is further exacerbating the path we're on with respect to climate change. And so going forward, there's going to be an increased emphasis to control fire or to
Hmm.
reduce emissions due to fire for those reasons. But yeah, it's really problematic in that we're kind of caught in this positive feedback loop.
This loop, obviously, we live in a global world, but are there any sort of are these loops kind of do they stay in any way in a particular area, if that makes sense? So if there's heightened wildfires, heightened emissions in Western Canada, can we repeatedly see these same effects more concentrated in this part of Canada, or does it just affect the rest of the globe, if that makes sense?
Uh, I'm not sure. I
Yeah.
do think fire is becoming more of a global phenomena. I mean, the smoke from fires, once it's in the atmosphere, it can circle the globe several times.
Yeah.
You'll see that, smoke from one country will impact another country. That was happening last year for sure. The smoke can land in like glacial deposits, and you can
Yeah.
see signals from a large fire in one part of the world and another part of the world. If you're looking in like more like doing like cores
Yeah.
out of glaciers or the soil, you can see signals from fires that didn't even occur in that jurisdiction. The other thing that I noticed in some recent fire seasons is smoke does an interesting thing in that it creates this insulating layer. It can reduce temperatures on the surface of the earth.
Mm.
It can increase humidity slightly. It shades things out.
Mm.
And from a real practical perspective, I've seen it where, in conducting prescribed fire, if you get a cloud pass over and you're just on the edge of conditions that are conducive to getting that fire to burn, it just takes a cloud to pass over, and all of a sudden you can lose the column on the fire, and the
Mm.
fire behavior becomes subdued, and you might actually have a challenge getting the fire back up and burning again the way you want it to. So when you get these big fire seasons that blanket huge areas with smoke.
Mm.
I recall a recent fire season in Alberta where we were on edge, like the hair on the back of our neck was up, and we're thinking, oh my goodness, could be a bad year. And then, yeah, I think it was, I want to say it was either 2018 or 2021. BC
Mm.
sent a bunch of smoke across Canada,
Mm.
and it blanketed Alberta. And we got through that period with kind of typical fire
Wow.
behavior in Alberta. And so again, I think, fire activity in one region can start to influence what's going on in another region. And I think these larger scale interactions are not well understood. These are things I've kind
Mm.
of observed, but
Yeah.
I can't confirm scientifically. But I do think there are large connections that we're going to start to see more and more of as fire becomes more of a global phenomena. And so, yeah, to answer your question, yeah,
Yeah.
I think there are some of these kind of connection points at a larger scale, but maybe more for us to learn.
Yeah. To think that there are benefits of smoke, like I wouldn't have even thought about that, because obviously, from a human health standpoint, it's been terrible the last few years, right? We have two young kids. I don't know if you have any kids, but it's just, you're so anxious to go outside in the summer and you can't because, of all the air quality advisories. But to think from a wildfire perspective, we don't, like you said, it's not well understood, but maybe there could be some positive benefits at times.
Yeah, smoke's going to be a big thing. Like whether you're directly impacted by a fire or not, you will be impacted by the smoke. And it's
Yeah,
a thing that I have kids as well, and it's, oh, we'd like to go biking today. We can't. We're going to have to stay inside, kind of thing. And
yeah.
these are the real impacts that large portions of society are going to be facing going forward. And yeah, I like to see blue skies just like everyone else.